Background to Danger from 1943 was an entertaining international wartime thriller about a German spy ring, about false rumors being spread of Soviet Russia planning to invade neutral Turkey during the war, and the always entertaining George Raft caught up in the middle of everything. The film also features several other familiar faces along the way, and it was a great film. And let's take a closer look, shall we? The film opens up in Turkey during World War II, a country that historically was neutral in the war, and yet filled with espionage and intrigue. So we see the character Colonel Robinson, played by Sidney Greenstreet, who is this big German guy with the Gestapo. Now, his scheme is initially to stage an assassination attempt of the German ambassador. And we see that, and it goes wrong, and the colonel, seeing that this has failed, is forced to turn to a different diabolical scheme. Meanwhile, we are introduced to the character of Joe Barton, played by actor George Raft. One of my favorite actors is this easygoing American character. He's there at a train station buying some gum, and then he gets on the train. Now, while he's there, he gets sweet with another passenger named Anna, played by actress Osa Mason. Now, realizing that she can trust him and worried about how she's probably going to be searched for papers, she asks him to hold on to some envelopes containing her inheritance papers because, he's an American, he's less likely to be searched. So he agrees, goes along with it, but later discovers that the papers are actually images of Turkey, like map pictures with writing all over it. I mean, what could this be? Well, they arrive at the station. He goes to visit with her later in the shady part of town, and he finds her, but she's been mortally injured. "Mr. Barton," she says as she collapses to the ground, and she's apparently died. Now, seeing that someone is arriving, Joe goes into hiding just in time to see the character of Nikolai show up, played by actor Peter Lorre. And we see him kind of looting through her belongings and so on. Well, Joe makes an escape, but not before a brief encounter outside with the character Tamara, played by the lovely actress Brenda Marshall, who I just caught recently in the very silly movie The Smiling Ghost. That was actually my last review. And he flees, and Tamara tells Nikolai about this fleeing man, and he pursues. And we see them kind of sneaking around some mysterious crime noir-looking streets. Joe finally gets away. But back at his room, the police arrive and bring him downtown for some questioning. But they don't make it to the police station, and rather, they bring him to meet with Colonel Robinson, this Gestapo guy. And he says he wants the letters. Well, Joe denies having them, so the colonel says he's going to be taken downstairs to the cellars for a rough beating. And they're about to get started roughing him up when Nikolai shows up for the rescue, and the two get away, and Tamara drives their getaway car. So they go back to Nikolai's hideout, and they tend to Joe's wounds. And Nikolai, again, this is Peter Lorre's character, he's chatty and happy, and he's very fond of vodka, as we find out. And they all talk together. Now, they get around to a full disclosure, and Nikolai confesses that he and Tamara, they're agents with the Soviet Union. Joe tells him he's just a guy that sells machinery, and he's been in Syria for the last few months. Well, Nikolai demands the papers, and he thinks that Joe has them, and he demands them at gunpoint, but Joe gives him a bop and leaves. Joe gets back to his room, and he sees that it's been looted, and his papers are gone. Joe, maybe using chewing gum to fasten papers beneath a desk isn't the best idea, but whatever. The police soon arrive, and Joe bolts, gets out of there. He heads to town, and at this smoke shop, he asks for Polo cigarettes in a very spy movie sort of way. Now, the guy behind the counter is Hassan, who gets this clue. He's played actually by actor Turhan Bey, who was an old favorite from the Mummy movies, from those old Universal classics. He was the guy that was always trying to reanimate old Caris the Mummy with those tasty tana leaves. So, kind of cool to see him here. Well, Joe gives him the code word. He goes and makes his way to the back of the shop to meet in secret with his boss, McNamara, who's played by actor Willard Robertson, who I recently caught as the amazing cheeseball attorney in the movie Remember the Night. And he was great there. So we see now that Joe is like a spy and he's on assignment. And McNamara assigns Hassan to accompany Joe, and the two of them head off to Istanbul. Now, Colonel Robinson's next move is going to be to bribe a newspaper publisher to print a story saying that there are documents revealing a secret Russian plan to invade Turkey. And as we near the end of the film, Can Joe apprehend this fiendish plot? Well, you're going to have to watch the ending for yourself. No spoilers. But this was a fun spy thriller with plenty of action and some exciting chase scenes, too. Quick closing thoughts here. Background of Danger was a Warner Brothers film directed by Raoul Walsh and was based on a novel by Eric Ambler called Uncommon Danger. The screenplay was listed as by W.R. Burnett, although William Faulkner was involved as well. And initial thoughts watching this film was that it had this flavor and this feel, this exotic Turkish locations, the involvement of Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre definitely had a Casablanca feel to it. I mean, heck, even George Raft with the trench coat and the hat, it's kind of like seeing Bogart back in action again. Like, I don't know, maybe after selling Rick's place, he became a spy or something. I don't know. In fact, one of the reasons I enjoy the film They Drive by Night from 1940, not only was it an excellent film, but you see both Humphrey Bogart and George Raft in that film together as brothers, and that worked well. So there's sort of a connection. When I see George Raft, I think, he's kind of got a Bogart vibe to him. And that's a good thing. I do really like George Raft a lot. I've seen a number of his films, and he always does this fine job as this believable, tough guy character. And he's really great here. Brenda Marshall is in the film as well, and she is great as the Soviet spy character. But honestly, I thought there wasn't really as much romance or chemistry between the two of them as I would have liked to have seen. Now, Sidney Greenstreet is in the film, and of course, he is excellent as the big bad guy. And yeah, it's hard to see him and not think of his character, Signor Ferrari, and the Blue Parrot Club from Casablanca. But, here he is as this relentless villain, and he was really great here. Same with Peter Lorre's character as well. One final bit of information in looking through Louis Yablonsky's biography of George Raft. He describes a scene how during the filming of this movie, there was one scene that had to be shot several times. Apparently, George Raft was tied up by the bad guys, and perhaps out of boredom, Peter Lorre began blowing smoke in George's face. And according to Mac Gray, George told him at least 5 times to knock it off. Remember, George was actually tied up. Lorre would laugh, and he would spitefully continue to blow smoke at George. Finally, when George was untied, he was so furious that he ran into Lorre's dressing room and clobbered him. All right, I guess it's to be expected from a crime movie that the actors, might have to take out their aggressions, I guess. So that's just kind of a goofy little anecdote. So that's Background of Danger from 1943. I thought it was an enjoyable international action film with some exotic locales and good acting. It was a good story. It's one worth checking out.
First, like gentlemen, we'll have a drink of vodka.